The following podcast may include coarse language, graphic content, and politically and/or religiously sensitive material. Those of you who are offended by such content should fuck off. To learn more about Daemoneye Publishing and download free products, visit our website at daemoneye.net. That's DAEMONEYE.net. That is not dead which may eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die.
We're back!
Hello, once again, welcome to the Daemoneye Podcast, number 9, Technology and Gaming. This is the podcast where we discuss tabletop and electronic gaming, science, technology, sci-fi, fantasy fiction, geek culture, and the contents of Edward James Olmost's secret pleasure closet.
Plus whatever happens to come out of our asses.
Wait a
minute. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. You already covered that with the Edward James Olmos. My bad.
Not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, not the standard 10-foot pole. All right, so it's been a while, hasn't it? But there is a good reason for that. Tyler was erstwhile occupied with other matters.
Such as moving, a school schedule that was completely freaking insane. And then, of course, there's the whole, I'm getting married, if I can get enough money together.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Tyler's getting married. And would you like to share the link to your GoFundMe website with our listeners, Tyler?
Sure. Yeah, we can put it in the description of the video. But for those of you just listening to the audio, GoFundMe.com/Minty Cacao Wedding.
Just how it sounds. Minty, MINTYCACAO. Wedding.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as you can understand, we've been busy. Well, not just Tyler. I have returned from San Francisco. I like to refer to my 2 years in the city as my time in exile. I am back in Sacramento, and despite being between opportunities, I'm actually quite happier here. Not happy about not having a job, but c'est la vie. Still looking around, trying to stay active, stay productive, and stay creative. And now I have more than enough time in which to do so, and I'm not any of the three compared to what I was beforehand. Go figure. But I'm getting back into it. So, So besides all that crap, Tyler, how have you been recently?
Been getting used to some new medications from the VA. It's been a trial.
As for me, just like I said, trying to stay busy. Not much else to add beyond that. Just that we're trying to get back to the podcast now that both of us have some some free time. With that little introduction out of the way, we should probably get rolling on the topic, which is technology and gaming. So this is kind of a broad topic, but the basic idea is, how have technological advancements or new technology changed or advanced or done whatever to gaming? And I'd like to start off by... Go ahead.
In order to cover this, I think we should cover how it all started and the technology that was involved when gaming first became what we now know of as gaming. That way we can compare it to where we're at.
Well, we have to make a certain distinction here, Tyler. Remember, our podcast is about tabletop and electronic gaming. So do we talk about like the traditional tabletop, the analog gaming, or electronic gaming? Because both of those could be the subject of a podcast themselves.
Well, one of the things that I've been noticing a lot recently is that the two are starting to converge. You have things like the virtual tabletop that's been
the tabletop simulator, yes, that's available on Steam Games. That was going to be one of the things I brought up.
So you're getting a lot of merging of the two. There was going to be EverQuest Next, which was supposed to be having live DMs actually running scenarios in an MMO setting, but that got shit canned for basically corporate asshole reasons.
Well, as is often the case. To be fair, even since Ultima Online, MMORPGs have had game masters that occasionally ran events. But yeah, I see how it was supposed to be more dedicated to that idea. But Tabletop Simulator, that's definitely something we want to get into. But let's try to distinguish between electronic gaming and tabletop gaming first. So, I mean, let's face electronic gaming, video games, PC games, people have already gone along and on about the history of it and how, it has progressed from the first game, whatever it might be it Pong or Tennis for Two or whatever. But the question I would want to pose to you is, putting aside things like higher resolution graphics or 3D or like better sound, voice acting, just the aesthetics of it. What technological advances in gaming have actually changed the breadth as far as gameplay goes? Two player, multiple player, for example, those are actual changes to the very fundamental core of gaming or to the dynamics. I mean, you could have movie quality graphics from day one, but if the gameplay is very simplistic because it's limited by certain technological limitations like hardware or lack of internet, then doesn't really mean much. So how has technology changed that?
Well, I would say that the one major innovation, the fulcrum upon which the entire industry turned, was the ability for anybody anywhere to buy polyhedral dice instead of having to roll six-sided dice in reference tables. Because I gotta tell you, man, that was a massive pain in the ass.
We're talking about...
I almost stopped, when I started gaming right at that point. And I almost stopped gaming until I went down to the local comic book store, and right there, with like sunlight shining on it, you could almost hear the orchestral choir singing all in the background, was a little box, clear of translucent, with a set of polyhedral dice in it for $5.
Tyler, I was talking about electronic gaming first, video games and whatnot.
Oh.
Okay, a little miscommunication there. I was going to transition to tabletop a little later. I want to get electronic out of the way first.
Well, a lot of the electronic gamings, like the old Baldur's Gate and the Blue Box series, they simply wouldn't be around if it wasn't for the tabletop fan base that actually made them popular. So the introduction of things like polyhedral dice, easy access to Xeroxing so you could Xerox new character sheets, all of that actually built the fan base that allowed for electronic gaming to become the sensation that it was, that then allowed for for the eventual evolution of MMOs.
What I'm kind of trying to push us more to discuss is, what are innovations in gaming besides just better graphics, better sound, voice acting, and so on and so forth. But I would say that you've touched upon MMORPGs, and that was a major one. The introduction of the internet actually turned PC gaming from a mostly solo activity into a multiplayer activity. That's definitely one of the major innovations there, especially it was first just, LAN parties, but then it became, actual MMORPGs, the first major one being Ultima Online. But before then, there were also MUDs, but those had no graphics to speak of. This, as internet connections got better, and you got companies actually starting to integrate them into gaming. It was the first time that multiple multiplayer capabilities really got into electronic gaming. And until then, the only option really for multiplayer was either sitting with your friend with a Nintendo or a Sega or whatever, or playing, an actual board game or a role-playing game. Until then, that was the only option.
Well, speaking of innovations, there's one that's about to come out. They're doing the beta testing on it right now, called Crowfall, where basically the worlds are semi-randomly generated, and you go in and you just monster them trying to dominate, because each world is on a timer, and when the timer ends, whichever individual, small group, or clan actually dominated the most. Like, let's say you achieved 20%, you and your group achieved 20% of the adventure goals, because all the adventures are one shot only. You get 10 mouse hides hides for a guy, well, he doesn't need any freaking mouse hides anymore. He isn't going to stand out there outside going, I need 10 more mouse hides. But no. Once you've achieved, if say you do 20% of all of the adventures in the campaign world, then when the campaign world finishes off and dies, you get 20% of the loot.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, that's the idea is technology permitting more variety of gameplay and options rather than just clever graphics. Another advance which we're seeing right now is the return of virtual reality.
Oh yes, I am so looking forward to getting a set. Like I mentioned before, with the virtual tabletop game, there's a virtual reality system that's it's insanely cheap. It's like $100, but it's not so much virtual reality as it is augmented reality. The idea being that you could use these glasses and they project a low intensity laser into your environment, not into your eyes. And then if you're looking at a semi-reflective surface, such as say that reflective tape that you see on vests, and yes, you can buy that big bats of that reflective tape. It disassociates the laser light that's being emitted by the glasses, and your eyes function as a lens to actually form a semi-solid 3D image in front of you when you're looking at it. What I want to see, and I know somebody's going to do, because if nobody else does it, I will fucking do it, is I want to see that integrated with the virtual tabletop system so you can actually have 3D models in your virtual environment and play D&D or whatever with friends that are halfway across the freaking world.
Well, that would be interesting. That would definitely be essentially more immersive play. Because I would say that VR, to a certain extent, is just another extension of, aesthetics. It's better graphics, or at least more involved graphics. It brings to a greater feeling of immersion. Another example that might be coming up in the future is as AI gets better, you might start having games in which NPCs react more realistically. They can better and respond to unpredictable choices by the players. Because even these days, if you're playing a character in a game and you have NPCs, there are only a limited number of responses they can give to a limited number of actions or questions. The stereotypical example being like Baldur's Gate or the Mass Effect series. You can't just do anything in there because there's X amounts of responses. It would take too much programming to put in all the different things. It would take way too long for the programmers for every NPC to include a response to everything the player could possibly say and weave that into the plot. So I'm thinking as technology gets better.
That's actually a misconception.
Yeah.
You see, you don't need to program an individual AI for each individual character. You just need to program one databank AI with your response or with your responses and everything, and then each character starts off with a set number of preset settings. Like, let's say your databank includes a bunch of settings that could be classified as hostile. Well, if the NPC you're talking to would normally be hostile, it would start off referring to that hostile databank, and you would have to use social skills or whatever to get it into a more friendly section of the databank. So you only really need the one databank of responses in order to integrate it with all your different AIs. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited about Crowfall, is because they're doing that.
Huh. Well, not even most games couldn't even a year ago couldn't even dream of having something that involved. But
this kind of thing has been around for over a decade. You don't see it in games, not because it's so involved to integrate. It's relatively easy to integrate. You don't see it in games, like particularly MMOs, because everybody has to talk to the NPC. Everybody has to follow the same storyline. Everybody has to be able to get the same quests. So you can't really have an NPC that's capable of changing its reactions in response to to a player interacting with them. Because as soon as that player walks away, the NPC has to reset to normal. So it's just a lot easier and on the programmers if they don't even bother with all of that, and they just give you the simple neutral, good or bad responses, and then you just go on your way. It's just, they view NPCs as like steps that you have to go through to actually get up to where your actual storyline event is supposed to be.
Well, yes, but then even if you have that complex AI, which can almost pass the Turing test, the problem is then how do you integrate all those responses and all those actions into the game world as a whole, putting aside MMORPGs where there has to be standardization, where you have to work out like thousands or tens of thousands of possible ways the plot of the story could go.
That's just it. That's one of the things that Crowfall figured out is what they're doing is they're doing the campaign worlds have a time limit. When the time limit is up, new campaign world is generated to replace it, and you have new NPCs, new adventures, and all of that. So you can actually go around or one of my favorite things that I actually plan on doing because I plan on running a mercenary guild. One of my favorite things is if you have a group that's doing a mission for an NPC, you can keep them from ever completing that mission by killing the NPC.
Well, what I'm getting more into is that what if you play a character who calls himself the Pink Pirate and always hits people with wiffle bats? I mean, how could you program that inevitability in the game plot in a otherwise normal world and have the NPCs respond with the appropriate levels of astonishment and inquire as to why you're doing that? That's why I'm getting into a true interactive world, on par with what we might expect from a human GM.
That's just an exclusive reaction set. The idea would be that, let's say you have, you tag everything in the world with or all the weapons with a threat level. Anything that can be wielded would have a threat level. If you go up at a guy with this big double-handed bastard sword, it would assign that, like, say, a threat level 10, and then it would look at the threat level 10 appropriate responses, randomly pick one, and apply it. If you go at the guy with a wiffle bat, which has like a threat level 0, it would assign responses from the threat level 0 set and randomly pick one and apply them. So you could get an NPC when you go up at him and swing a wiffle bat at him who just laughs his ass off. You can get another one who runs around. You can get another one who lifts up his codpiece and flaps his genitalia at you. Just whatever the programmers put in as the threat, or if threatened with a threat level 0 weapon, this is what you do.
Yeah, but my point is it would require advanced computing powers and advanced algorithms, which pretty much are advanced AI research. You'd have to incorporate that into the game. And until recently, that really hasn't been really accessible because we were limited by existing programs, existing computing power. And that's why, that technology contributes to a more realistic game world where players can respond and be responded to more realistically.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this part. Most advanced AI right now is really concerned with real language interpretation. The ability to talk to an artificial creature the way I'm talking to you and actually have it understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes, but then you have to incorporate the dialogue, but also the actions, the reactions in the game world as a whole. And it's, it's a butterfly effect. One change at one point in the plot changes other things and changes other things. Remember, Yahtzee Crosher of Zero Punctuation observed that there are a lot of games which claim that their plot, branches and decisions you make have huge effects, but there are very few examples of games where they really do that. I mean, there's also a problem of voice acting. You have to have the voice actors, you'd have to either develop some sort of speech program where they can have the computer say anything or respond to any dialogue and have it for every single voice and do so in a way that properly reflects human tone, intonation, emotion, so on and so forth.
Well, that gets back to what I was talking about earlier, where as far as being able to actually have appropriately branching patterns, you can't really do that in most games these days, or in the way most games are designed, because you always have to get people back on the road. Now, the vast majority of computer games, MMOs, whatnot, are really just very well disguised linear path adventures. As far as being able to have a computer actually produce a response in understandable real world speech, well, I already mentioned that that's what we're trying to do right now is get a computer to understand real world speech. But it also works backwards.
Yeah, but it goes beyond that. I mean, it's also trying to make the computer as much a storyteller. It's trying to make the computer a GM. Yes, you have all these response, but I kind of also still keep the momentum of the plot, momentum of the story, and have the characters could just step to the side and screw around. And
at that point, At that point, we're going to need something between weak and strong AI. We need creative but controllable artificial intelligence. We haven't even managed to get creative artificial intelligence. We have an AI that can half-assedly design a computer game that basically looks like that's basically a bunch of random elements thrown together, but thrown together in such a way that it's playable. That's the closest we've been able to get.
Yeah. Now, my point is that I think that's the direction we're going, and in that way, we actually have a real quantum leap in gaming, and actual variety in gameplay depth and possibilities that goes beyond simple graphics or better graphics or new gameplay and whatever. That's the real contribution of technology to gaming, not just aesthetics. I mean, aesthetics are important as far as immersion goes, but again, you can play extremely realistic, extremely pretty, extremely well-made game of Pong, but it's still just Pong.
That's just it. You see, creativity is basically relevant randomness. You can't have, if you're playing a sword and sorcery adventure, and then suddenly Pee Wee Herman comes out and goes, the next quest is over that hill. That's random, but it's not relevant. Now, if you had a gnome come out who acted like Pee Wee Herman and went, the next quest is over that hill, that's random and relevant. It's getting to that union point between randomness and relevance that we're having an issue with. That brings up something. There's an idea that I had a while back about faking it. What you do is...
Sorry, go on.
What you do is you randomly select between scripts that are submitted by players. Now, let's say you have you summon a monster to fight for you. Well, that monster's AI script, whether it turns, what attacks it uses, and all of that, will be randomly picked from a pool of AI scripts designed by the players. Of course, you don't want just any Tom, Dick, and Harry designing AI scripts, so you'll actually have to have some sort of barrier of entry to prove that the guy, that the player who did it knows what the hell he's doing. Like, let's say you can summon 4th level monsters or something like that before you let him design AI scripts. So, what you never know quite what the monster you summon is going to do. It's going to randomly behave. But because the AI script was designed by somebody who realizes, I'm likely to get this AI script, I want it to be able to do something that's relevant when I summon it. It's going to be random and still relevant.
Same lines as the Spore, Alien Creator, or the level designs from Little Big Planet. I mean, that's been done, but you would have to have a gatekeeper, and that would be a full-time job, just sorting away the good ideas from the trash and the joke ones.
Well, a way to do that would be to have a voting system. Like you can up thumb or down thumb a particular AI script. And then AI scripts are assigned, essentially, they're randomized by popularity. If an AI script has 100 up thumbs, it has 100 times the chance of getting assigned as an AI script that only has 1 up thumb.
Well, I mean, then you might have a situation where it's a monster, but it has it's extremely easy to beat, yet it's kind of tough. You have to look out for exploits. But I see where you're going with that, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, there are ways to exploit it and everything. But it isn't like it's going to be in a Spore where you're going to have AIs controlling monsters that walk around drawing penises on the ground all the time.
Yeah. Well, my point is, creativity is not just randomness, though. I'd like to add, it also incorporates a matter of taking 2 or more previously uncombined elements and using them in a novel way. That's another definition of creativity. So it's remixes. That's another aspect of creativity.
Yeah, and that's when we're getting into the point where we need something between a strong and a weak AI that's capable of actually designing game elements on its own.
Well, I mean, that's the point. I mean, the reason I kind of harped on this in the beginning and kind of pushed us in this discussion is because I want to point out that actual gameplay innovation in electronic gaming is relatively rare. I mean, the internet caused a big change because you could have multiplayer components more readily, and not just 2 or 3 players, but multiple ones. The whole MMORPG genre was spawned from this. VR, there was an initial false start with the Nintendo virtual reality, the Virtual Boy, which was a piece of shit. And there's a bunch of knockoffs. Yeah.
The PS 4.5 that's coming out, they're requiring that all future games have programming in it designed for VR headsets. Because that's basically the 4.5 is it's a PS4, but with integrated hardware to run a virtual headset.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about. I usually refer to it as the WoW effect. The idea that World of Warcraft did this and made shit tons of money, so everyone wants to do the same thing, so to basically leech off some of the money from World of Warcraft. But and then they usually end up swirling the toilet drain and going under because they fail to realize people are going to be switching from World of Warcraft to, say, a science fiction game or something. They're doing it for the novelty. They're not doing it to play World of Warcraft reskinned.
Well, if it's done correctly, or if it's an interesting story, or the aesthetics are better, or has a good community, that can change the game. But yeah, there's something to that. It can't just be a gimmick, something which is added to it, which just doesn't really add much to the gameplay. I mean, there's also whole genres of games like real-time strategy, which was one of the first was Dune, and then Command and Conquer. I mean, when you have increased computing power, you have the space to develop these new gameplay styles, these new approaches. But we're kind of reached a limit now because right now, we have so much more computing power. We can handle a lot more code and a lot more as possible with all these different genres. But I think the next quantum leap will be incorporating AI and creativity into the game itself. And VR, I think, is just mostly going to be an aesthetic thing. It's a new immersion. It makes you feel like you're more in the game, but it doesn't...
Actually, I got to disagree with you on that. I think before we get to AI that can actually design game elements, we'll have a quantum leap before that in crowdsourcing game elements.
I would argue we're already almost there.
Yeah, we are almost there, but we're almost there. We haven't gotten to the point where MMO designers are actually giving out user-friendly tools with the MMO game that you can unlock through play to design, say, your own weapon skins or your own monsters and submit them to the servers.
Well, that's because the first thing most people do when they're given that option is to make giant dick guns.
Sadly, yeah, but that's a human element.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you have humans involved in it, you're going to have penises.
Well, that and Nazi flags and KKK cloaks and anything that can offend, they'll do. So that's a problem. That's kind of the balancing that oversight with freedom. And it's, to a certain extent, you'd almost want, if they're going to have that shit, just mock them and disparage people who do that shit, but some people just will keep on doing it just because they like the attention or they think they're pushing some cause.
Yeah, but by the same token, you're going to have people who go total SJW on it, and somebody submits something that's relatively innocuous and completely game-friendly, and then it gets, voted off of the island because that undead monster triggered me because it looks like my dead uncle.
I would honestly argue that's just the dick thing in a different skin. No pun intended.
Yeah, actually it is.
Yeah, just very, so anyways, that may or may not be the next quantum leap, but I think we're just kind of getting into how advances technology have and may in the future contribute to gaming variety and depth in electronics. Now let's move back, well, do you have any last comments, Tyler?
Oh, just, like I said, I'm really, really looking forward to Crowfall. I got a beta test code so I can actually do the beta tests on it. But sadly, I'm running a Linux box and they're doing it for Windows only. And I could actually get it running on Linux if I had a list of the game dependencies so that I could fake it on Linux. But I don't have a list of game dependencies, so I am stuck not being able to do anything more than watch the videos.
Okay, for the sake of transparency, I am not aware of Crow World, and Daemoneye Publishing has no affiliation, was not paid for this endorsement.
Yeah, not Crow World, Crowfall.
Crowfall, pardon me. Yeah, as you can see, this is the first I've heard of it.
This is me completely fanboying.
All right, fair enough. All right, so with that last comment, we can move on to tabletop gaming, i.e. analog gaming, i.e. no electronic doodads. So let's talk about how technology...
Except the calculator.
Well, fair enough. Let's talk about how technology has changed that. I mean, first of all, you could argue that that tabletop gaming is pretty much as old as civilization itself. Backgammon Go, the Chinese Go. But let's go ahead and set kind of a starting point and say, the early days of miniature wargaming.
Pretty much the big innovation that I can see is the introduction of 3D printed miniatures. I mean, there's an entire site, Hero Forge, that will let you custom design and then print and then ship you your own 3D printed miniature. How awesome is that? I have 2 of them.
Until recently, tabletop gaming as we know it now, board gaming, role-playing games, miniature wargaming hasn't changed that much until very recently. I mean, you bought miniature wargaming, you bought the paints, you bought the miniatures, you painted them. For tabletop gaming, you bought the books and you ran the game.
You got the maps or the tile sets now that came out a while back where you can assemble your own maps, but that falls under the category of better graphics but not better innovation.
Yeah, I mean, the technology was still there. It was just a very good idea, and there was also a bigger market for it towards the end of the decade. That's it. I mean, that's the one thing about gaming. I mean, despite all the technological advances, despite the easy accessibility of online gaming, despite the fancy schmancy graphics, despite MMORPGs, people still like to sit down in front of a table, get out some dice, and play, and make believe with rules with the GM.
Well, consider, as if you have a GM, you're basically playing a game with a strong AI.
Well, I bet some GMs who I wouldn't exactly call intelligent, artificial or otherwise.
Okay, weak AI.
Usually.
Or better yet, AD, artificial dumbass.
Yeah, but if you have a good GM, though, I doubt even computers 10 or even 20 years from now could really beat a really good GM as far as an entertainment game goes.
There was a book I read a while back called For the Win by Cory Doctorow. And in it, they had MMOs. It was like a near future book where basically MMOs were a lot bigger part of the culture. But they had MMOs that hired people to be what they called mechanical Turks. Essentially little mini GMs with little mini GM powers to like put a monster here, reward a character for an action there, assign damage statistics to a section of wall so that it can be blown through, that kind of thing.
I mean, they have those in a lot of MMORPGs right now. They had those in Ultima Online. I'm pretty sure they had those in EverQuest. I mean, they actually did sometimes play a role in running large events, creating monsters and so forth.
Yeah, I think that would be a good middle ground until we can build up to strong AI.
I think so too, yeah. But I mean, even then, I'd say there's also the social aspect of it, which is why I think it will stick around. Just people have been predicting the death of role playing for ages, but it's still around. But getting back to the main topic, I mean, there have been some relatively recent innovations which brought on by advances in technology, or at least the proper application of existing technologies. Which, and you mentioned this in the very beginning.
Virtual tabletops.
Yeah. Tabletop Simulator on Steam is essentially a tabletop where you can program like little miniatures, little figures, dice. It has a dice rolling program. There's multiplayer options. There's a chat function. So essentially lets you play any role-playing game and even program rules and sets like that into the simulator with anyone in the world as long as they have a decent internet connection. So this is pretty much like the ultimate multiplayer, so to speak. It has both imagination and technology.
Yeah, but that is a nice technology. Like I said earlier, it allows you to play your favorite games with people all over the world. But a major component of tabletop gaming is the social aspect, being able to chat with your friends. I think that, the virtual tabletop is missing half of the experience, which is why I'm excited about that. Basically, that very cheap laser powered headset that I talked about earlier, because it has a camera fixed to it, so it can actually transmit what you're seeing. So you could, or if you could actually, if you wanted to, look around, and based on cameras that are in your local environment, like a webcam you have set up in your local environment, you can project your own image. So you could, if you and your friends had similar setups, everybody could look like they were all sitting around the same table playing a game.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of chat and video chat programs. You could probably just run that in addition to the tabletop simulator. I think there might even be some sort of support for that in the game, in the program itself. I should have looked into it more before I started the podcast, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's there. I mean, you don't even technically need, well, I mean, the tabletop is a nice medium ground for like the GM to actually have the figures and the dice and so forth. So we're all playing fair. No one's cheating, but combine that with Skype and, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, but Skype is...
Skype
won't give you the virtual effect. Skype, you'll always be turning and clicking back and forth. It doesn't give you the virtual image effect. And really, that virtual socialization is very important in tabletop gaming. I mean, can you imagine playing a tabletop game where you can't look to your left and see another player and like whisper something to, or like, make out like you're whispering something to them, where the player to your right or the player across the table is looking at you going, what are you talking about? What are you saying? The joking around and the joviality that always happens when you have a bunch of friends around a table would be completely missing if you ran it off of Skype video chat or something like that.
Well, I mean, that goes for anything. I mean, that goes for electronic gaming in general, or anything virtual in general. There's social aspect is something you really can't, or it's hard to simulate, which would require more of a VR world. But even then, I mean, I agree with you there, because that social aspect is an important part of it, and and there's another point which I want to bring across, which touches upon that assholes on the internet problem we mentioned when we talk about user-generated content. When you play online, you don't unconsciously register the other players as human beings. You register them as blips and dots and text boxes on your computer. So your brain, well, maybe if you've trained yourself properly, you ignore this, but your brain treats them like they are just objects. It doesn't have that same human response. Or maybe if you're a sociopath, that's a whole other deal. That's part of the reason I think, I'm pretty sure that's part of the reason why people act like such assholes online, is because there's not a person saying in front of them, basically scowling at them when they kill their favorite character just for the lulz.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that itself is good. If you're in a real game with real people who are sitting a couple inches away from you, that's a different. So that's actually a social affair. I mean, you can argue that, no, I'm playing with other people, I'm socializing. No, you're not. Because, again, you unconsciously treat the people on the computer as not quite human, whether you want to or not, even if it's unconscious. That's a lot of it.
It's an inevitability. I mean, we associate our humanity with the faces of the people that we see. That's why images from war-torn areas where you see the faces of the people that have been brutalized are so powerful, is because you see their faces, you see their humanity. And online, all you see is that they're like, Dog Killer 77.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I think there is something to be said for a true virtual reality tabletop where it actually responds. You turn your head, you actually see, the motion detector on the VR goggles registers this, and it shifts the view, kind of like Oculus Rift does or whatever. So, yeah, I think that would get it closer to an actual social event. You could argue that is actually socializing. But at the same time, I think it's not quite the same. You're not there. You're not breathing the same breath they are. That's why I think real tabletop gaming will never die, despite how far gaming comes, until we get to holodecks, in which case all bets are off.
Yeah. At that point, when you can have virtual sex with Deanna Troi, who the hell cares if there are other people around?
Yeah. All right. So getting back to one of your other points, 3D printing. Now that is an actual technological innovation which does have a major impact on gaming, not so much gaming per se, but on the gaming industry.
Oh yeah. A huge part of the gaming industry, whether it's tabletop gaming or whether it's war gaming, is the production of miniatures. Because you need miniatures to play. Well, you can play with little, like, chits and stuff, but it loses something without that three-dimensional aspect.
Well, I mean, I've run games where I've even done combat in D&D where there were no miniatures. I just kind of described where they are. But yeah, miniatures are really needed when you have any degree of complexity as far as combat goes, especially combat. So there are no arguments over, I was 5 feet away. No, you were 10 feet away. No, I was up here.
Yeah. It really without an appropriate, not even appropriate, but without miniatures, period, a fight loses a lot of its viscerality.
Yeah, it's actually there. That's why people like more realistic miniatures, so you can actually see the action taking place. You could just use like a grid pad and a bunch of wadded up bunches of chewing gum and some pennies if you wanted to, but that kind of takes away from it. It's actually being there in front of it as opposed to just, looking at little text on the screen.
It's being able to see the dragon's face as the miniature of the dragon's towering over your miniature of your little gnome character and looking up at it, and you can just imagine your character looking up at the dragon going, meep.
And unfortunately, that was the one part of gaming which made it difficult for newcomers to get into it and or those who don't have much money, because for a while, those were quite expensive. And it took a lot of time. And you had miniature snobs who would only play with painted miniatures. I'm a bit of one that myself. So it was an expensive part of the hobby. And still is.
Yeah, it still is an expensive part of the hobby. But thankfully, with the Reaper's Bones miniatures, and once again, this is as an example, this is me fanboying. We're not supported by them.
No, I like Bones too.
Yes. Yeah, but they're cheap and they're very high quality.
Fairly high quality, yeah. They did a comparison where they looked at pewter miniatures versus Bones miniatures, and the polymer did suffer as far as detail goes in some small categories. And I forget which ones exactly when it came to paint and surface detail, but that wasn't that much.
No, it wasn't that much. And most of the time, if you needed a little bit of extra detail on a sword or a hand or something, a couple scrapes with a X-Acto knife and you're there.
Yeah, it's a little trickier to do a base coat, and actually that's a bad thing. A good thing is that they don't chip as easily as pewter miniatures do. So if you drop it, generally won't cause much damage.
They're more likely to bounce.
Yeah, bad side to it though, it's hard to customize miniatures because pewter is very malleable to being like shifted or bent or cut up and pasted on. So it's a little hard to do custom miniaturization, but actually 3D printing has a solution to that as well.
Yeah, you can 3D print the position that your figure is in, and how it's holding weapons, the whole 9 yards. I love that Hero Forge site.
Yeah, I mean, granted, 3D printing is still not quite not quite ready for prime time, and they're still trying to work out the kinks, trying to work out a more creator or user-friendly interaction, which lets you do a whole range of different miniatures, but we're getting there. We're very close.
Very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
I designed my ghost or my skeletal, my undead skeletal flaming motorcyclist character off of Hero Forge. We had the buck naked dwarven berserker off of Hero Forge. Lots of stuff that you can design off of Hero Forge. The one problem that I have with Hero Forge is that you can't do custom races. You have to take the races that they give you, because the races are, it's like the core that everything attaches to. So in that respect, you can't have tree people or something like that.
Yeah. So that's where we're at right now. And another thing I like about this 3D printing is that, well, I'm not sure if this is kind of tangential to the main point, but I mean, it's probably a combination of 3D printing and their own competency. But I think finally Games Workshop, which was like the Microsoft of miniature wargaming, is finally collapsing, and it's making way for other manufacturers, other miniature makers who want to get on the war games, because not just
couldn't have happened too soon.
I know. So because at our local game store, at least one of the ones I like to go to, for the last decade or so, or just even a couple of years ago, the only real miniature game in town was Warhammer and one of its many variants. Now we're seeing a lot other games being prominently displayed apart from GW shit. I mean, Reaper Miniatures is always around, and there's also Ralpaltha, and they're always a nice alternative to if you want to just paint miniatures for role-playing, not fucking Warhammer. But it's nice to see some alternative, fairly mainstream war games out there, and which don't involve GW because their shit was always overpriced, and it got more overpriced over time. And
the quality was shit.
It was decent at first, but now it's, well, I wouldn't even say it's shit anymore. It still is. Some of the miniatures are still pretty well made, well designed, but they are exorbitantly overpriced.
No, I don't mean shit as in poor design. I mean shit as in poor manufacture.
Oh, I see. Yes, you don't get a miniature so much as you do a bunch of little limbs you have to glue together by yourself because it makes it easier for them to make them. Yeah.
And half the time they actually don't fit together without going at them with an X-Acto knife to scrape out the extra molding plastic that was left behind.
The flash and the mold lines, they're called, yeah. So, anyways, I mean, this was a long time coming, but I think 3D printing, because GW is a dinosaur of a company. They barely adapted to online, to the internet when it first came on. They shut down many fan sites, and they seemed insistent upon plodding along in their old strategy and reinventing the game every couple of years just because. But I think also the advent of 3D printing will make more miniatures available cheaper, and also a bunch of other manufacturers coming. Again, this is only tangentially related to the main driving force behind their downfall, but I think it has contributed to it. So I think, thank goodness for 3D printing on that regard.
Definitely.
Yes. So that's 3D printing. So that's definitely made it miniatures more accessible, greater variety for more gamers, which makes it better to get into the game. Another thing which, it's not so much technology, I think, per se, but because it's another example where the technology was around for a while, but it took some creativity, combining two or more things in a novel way and advancing it to make it come about would be print on demand, which our company uses.
Yeah, so you don't have to have warehouses of books and then you just wait for them to be ordered. They can be printed and then shipped at the time that they're ordered. It's an awesome innovation, and well, it isn't an innovation. It's been around for a long time.
Well, I would argue that,
but it's recently become reliable.
Well, I would argue that that increased printing technology, or at least cheaper printing technology, combined with better, the availability of online distribution systems with better programming has allowed it to come to be. But yeah, basically. So,
all right.
Well, to be fair though, gaming has always been almost always been small press though. I mean, until TSR, a lot of the major game companies were very small press.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, gaming until relatively recently was never really the product of major gaming companies. At least, it's all about they're all about board games and family games. Tabletop role playing games, D&D, Traveller. A lot of them were very small press. I mean, they didn't have print on demand, but they still pushed it forward. They still found the way to make it out. They were small print runs, or sometimes they even released games in like plastic bags. So this is not a new phenomenon, but what it does mean is that people can get into it with less of a risk and less of an investment. It really has kind of opened the market and made it a little more democratic.
From the business side of it, gaming has always been less about the actual game itself and more about the franchise the game represents. For instance, we'll take the granddaddy of them all, Dungeons and Dragons. How many people, when the Dungeons and Dragons first came out, played the played the actual game relevant to how many people were interested in the game and went and bought the blue box computer games and the Baldur's Gate series and all of that. Honestly, I think more money was more money exchanged hands on the computer side of it than on the actual physical side of it. Because you buy a set of game books and you can play D&D until the cows come home. You buy a computer game and you can run through it once, twice, maybe 3 times before you've basically used up all the material. And now if you want to get your fix, you got to get the next one.
Well, to be fair, that's why D&D, especially AD&D, started pushing out all those different expansion and books and all those different campaign worlds and adventures. That was the idea.
Yeah, and that's honestly why we're focusing more on the quality of the individual book rather than the plethora of books. Instead of having the big book of swords, we're doing here's 15 books on how to do every single weapon conceivable by mankind. Oh. There might be a few that are left out on the fringes, but don't worry. Those will be available that'll be available in a book coming up later. We're going for more the flexibility and the utility rather than the book spam.
Well, to be fair, that's those expansions and all those compendiums and additional adventures. That's where the money was for a while.
Yeah, for a while, until people finally got sick of it and just stopped buying them.
Yeah, to be fair, there is something to be said for professionally designed and written adventures, and there's also kind of the shared community, and I think Knights at the Dinner Table magazine touched upon it, where there are these very famous adventures like the Tomb of Horrors that different players would play, and then they would talk about to their other gamer friends and say, they would share this experience and how they killed a monster on room 3B and how they managed to escape the trap on room 4B. That shared experience is something which I think is kind of missing from the game when you have too much just homebrewed stuff. Homebrewed stuff is great, but I think there's an argument for these common adventures and these common supplements in good measure, and especially if they're well written.
Referring to the shared experience, it also works the other way, where people who've played the game want to share something that they've come up with other people other game groups, but they can't. So one of the reasons back in the day that Dragon Magazine was so popular, not Dragon, but Dungeon Magazine was so popular, is because people could submit adventures, and if it was a good adventure, it would get added to this compendium of adventure magazines. So it would have anywhere between 5 and 8 adventures, and then you would buy the magazine, and you would have a set of adventures. Maybe 1 or 2 of them were actually usable in your campaign group at the time, but the others would at least give you good adventure ideas.
Well, I still had the shared experience where, assuming you weren't a jerk and bought the magazine, bought the Dungeon magazine before your GM did and played it fair and square, then talk to other people in other games about how you ran this adventure and what you did, your character did, and so forth and so on. That's also a shared experience.
Yeah. But these days, that's that backwards shared experience, the bottom-up shared experience, is more taken up by forums. Back in the day, a forum post, you would have to do this little dinky-dandy post, and that would be basically all the board can handle. These days, on some of the more robust forums, you could have scripts and shit. You could practically have an entire video game inside a forum post.
Well, yeah. I ran a very detailed and I like to think well-written forum RPG on the Mega Tokyo forums for a couple of years. I still think despite being a little pretentious, almost to White Wolf levels, I think it was a good creative exercise. Yeah.
All right. I'm basically tapped out. What about you?
No, I think that pretty much covers it, but I do want to comment here and point out that most of the tabletop innovations have been kind of more industry-based. They make it easier to make adventures, make products. There haven't been that much greater change in the core gameplay of tabletop games and board games, per se. Those have persisted, and the basic principles of how to run the game haven't changed that much.
Yeah, most tabletop innovations have been in the terms of, I believe the phrase you're looking for is accessibility. Accessibility,
yeah, and ease of play and increasing the immersive quality. There's occasionally some experimentation, where I don't know, like the Deadlands, where you would use like playing cards as opposed to like stat sheets or something. But those are relatively minor, and they really weren't spurred by technology. I mean, that's what makes it such a good role-playing game, so eternal and so long lasting. The basic concept is pretty simple, but you can add on to it as much as you want.
All right, I think we're done.
All right, and that pretty much covers it. Well, thank you again for listening in to the Daemoneye Podcast, number 9, Technology and Gaming. I am Tristan Eifler.
I'm J. Tyler Burrell.
And we'll catch you on the flip side. Yo.
Applesauce.